All right, look, I know you're sick of hearing about AI. It's all anyone's talking about right now, but I seriously think the topic I'm going to talk to you about today is going to be one of the most fundamentally important things that us as humans are going to have to adapt to. And it's actually a topic I haven't heard spoken about way too much, to be honest. And yeah, I actually think it's going to be one of the most important things that's going to change in like human history. And you'll see why in a short moment. And the reason I'm thinking so much about AI and what I'm going to talk to you about is actually because I'm writing a movie script about this, which will probably never get released, honestly. I don't know. Unless Christopher Nolan is watching this, please send me a DM or leave a comment and I'll send you the script. Anyway, okay, so here's my contention, right? I think that the advancement of technology, most notably in AI and robotics, is going to require a fundamental shift in the way that we as humans define what humanity actually is and how we define things such as our purpose, you know? So let's go into this bit by bit. Now, this video is going to be a tiny bit of a rant. I'm going to go a bit all over the place, but stick with me and hopefully you find something interesting. So just to give you a bit of a rundown about what my movie script is about, so you can see where all these ideas are coming from, it's about the first person to ever receive the Neuralink, okay? So if you don't know what the Neuralink is, it's basically a project that Elon Musk and his team have been working on, which is basically a computer that you pop into your head. This is the first time I'd heard about the idea of us being cyborgs already, from Elon Musk as well. And essentially what he said is that we already are cyborgs. So maybe when I just mentioned having, a computer in your head, you've thought, oh, that's a bit scary. You become a cyborg. Well, I think the reality is we already are cyborgs, and that's obviously what Elon Musk had said. Because when you think about you having a phone, right, your intelligence, your knowledge base is already augmented by this device. Okay, but the only difference between you using your mobile phone to do calculations or having a computer in your head that does the calculations is bandwidth, which obviously, as you can imagine, as technology gets better and better, the bandwidth is going to get bigger and bigger, and so you'll be able to process information faster. Okay, let's think about this a bit more practically. Okay, so you think about at the moment, like I said, you got your phone, and if I ask you to do any mathematical calculation, right, there's probably two components to it. You firstly need to understand how to do the maths and then how fast you can input it, right, and correctly to get the results. So, if I asked you to do some basic maths, like addition or subtraction or whatever, you could probably figure out how to do it on your iPhone, the calculator. But if suddenly, you start introducing other concepts, it might even be just percentages. Some people might be too comfortable with that. Or it might be, I don't know, some crazy thing to do with turbulence. Okay, you're doing maths about turbulence, which is a bit harder. That's not so easy, right? You might not be able to think of that immediately. And so what you might have to do is Google, how the fridge do I calculate turbulence? I mentioned turbulence, by the way, because I did some of that in university and it ruined my brain. And so you might Google it, figure out how to do it, then you can do it on your calculator, right? And so that takes a lot of time. So what happens one day when you have a computer in your brain, right, that has a lot faster access, right? For example, with AI, that understands turbulence and can calculate, knows the formulas it needs, and can also punch in the numbers or addresses the variables to make that calculation immediately. Well, then you're obviously getting the answers extremely fast, right? I'm not sure if that was a weird way to explain it, but hopefully that sort of makes sense. Okay, now I don't know when this is going to happen, by the way. I'm not saying this is going to happen next week, maybe not in a year, maybe not in 5 years, maybe not in 10 years, but I have a feeling it's going to happen for sure because technology has never slowed down. Okay, I think that's a given. I think in society, in capitalism, right, optimization is fundamental. So we're always, as humans, moving towards optimization and improving. I don't think it's just capitalism, by the way. I think it's just human nature to try, or not human nature, sorry, just nature in general, just biology, to try find ways to optimize. So I think it's probably a given that one day technology is going to get to that point where, yeah, it's going to be on our heads, we think, and it's going to be instantaneous. That was a bit of a possibly a messy way to introduce the concept. But what I'm trying to get at, right, is I'm trying to paint in your mind this picture of this world where one day you're going to have that chip in your head, right? And what does that mean? You're going to have infinite knowledge, or borderline infinite knowledge. So anything that you would now need to go on Google to search, you could think it and you would know it instantly. And you would have supercomputation. So any logical, right, or mathematical concept that you need to process, instead of needing to put in a calculator, you could probably just think of it and know the answer. Okay, let's stop there. Why is that so scary? Well, because what makes you different from anyone else in the world right now? You know, what makes people, think about this, in school, right? We are literally graded on our intellect. Like, that's how we are categorized at this moment in time. So what happens one day when everybody has a chip in their brain that provides them intellect that is beyond what we could comprehend as just biological humans? Like, everyone's going to have the same level of intellect because everyone's going to be able to do the same level of maths, have the same access to a vast level of information, right? So I think there's actually going to be like a flattening of intellect and IQ, I guess, in society, because it's going to be governed by this chip in our heads, or AI and technology, rather than our biological tendencies might allow us. So hopefully you might actually be reading between the lines of what I'm saying right now, which is that because of that technology, one day there's going to be a homogenization of humanity. Because this is only one example, right? But if everyone has the same level of intellect, right, that starts to make us like a one bunch of the same people with the same capacity. And when you think about AI and data, or just honestly humans in general, one thing we try to do is to try optimize, okay? It's like, for example, if I had to get from here, where I'm in Melbourne, right, to, let's say, London, what's the best way to get there? Is it a one-way flight? Is it stopovers? Is it via boat? Do I swim there? Do I teleport there? I don't know, right? One's obviously not feasible. Teleportation. I don't know why I said that, to be honest. So let's just say I had that goal to get to London, right? Like, what's the best way to get there? And that answer has a lot of variables, right? What if there's like a tornado at the airport, right? And so you couldn't actually do that. You would have to catch the, I was going to say ferry, but there's no ferry to London. But you jump on a container ship, right? You're a stowaway and you get to London that way. What I'm trying to say is, right, such a roundabout way of saying it, but what I'm trying to firstly get at is when we're trying to move from one destination to another, there's multiple ways there. Okay, and the way we get there is via optimization, and optimization is obviously based off variables. So we have to have an understanding of what variables there are and how the current state of the variables, and also even the future state of the variables, possibly based off possibility, like some level of chaos, right? And that right now is not always very obvious. Okay, but what happens one day when our information base increases and our ability to process variables gets better? Well, then there's going to be more evident ways and more objective, ideal ways to actually achieve particular goals. So you imagine that if we all have the same level of processing and a much higher level of data about the variables in our lives, then there's going to be much more objective pathways in which we follow. So picture this, right? One day we're going to have all these chips in our heads, right? And we're going to be walking in the city. And you know, sometimes when you walk in the city now, sometimes you follow a wave of people, and then you look ahead, obviously, and you see like a group of people on your right. So you move to the left. And sometimes you accidentally, bump into someone and you're sort of doing that dance. Well, one day, what happens when we all have the same chip in our heads that we can analyze the variables of walking on that road, and suddenly everyone's walking in these patterns because there's an optimized path. It's pathing, right? So again, that's going to actually homogenize humanity further. That was really abstract, but what I'm trying to say is that I'm not actually trying to talk about the pathing of walking down a road, although I think that is actually important. What I'm talking about is that in the future, there's going to be very objective, optimized pathways to reach particular goals. And we're all going to know that. We're all going to have the same conclusion because it's just going to be mathematically factual or extremely probable. So that will be the best actions for us to take. And so in the future, right, you can already see that we probably will have a very homogenized level of intellect, a very homogenized level of even decision making, okay, which is obviously starting to get a bit scary to think about already. And so what I think that is going to lead to is one day there's going to be groupthink, right? There's going to be like a hive mind where we're all thinking very similar things because it's possibly the mathematical optimized way to think. Just as a little sidebar, something that I thought is pretty interesting is that I also think that these implants in our heads will be able to affect our physiology. Like we'll be able to increase our reflexes, like the speed, right, of our reflexes, because it's not going to be governed by our biology, but possibly the processes in our brains. And also, I do think that one day these chips will be able to affect the actual biology in our brain too. So I don't know, that's not too relevant to what I'm trying to say here, but it's just a little side note, which I thought was quite interesting. Okay, so that was a bit of a rant, just to give you an overview. And I apologize if my phrasing is a bit hard to comprehend or isn't very lucid, because honestly, it is sort of a hard thing to talk about. And I've only tried to conceptualize it in my head. It's sort of hard to get out. So what's the first effect of the homogenization of humanity via technology? Well, I think the first thing is that there's going to be the eradication of the middle class. Now, I'm not an economist by any means, so don't listen to me. But what I think is that, I can think about it this way, right? You imagine that you're a lawyer, okay? And you've spent all these years learning about law, okay? And soon there's going to be a chatbot which knows more than you because he has infinite access to all the cases, all the outcomes. It might even have a better decision-making rationale than you do. And so what happens then? Well, that's obviously only one field, right? But we can multiply that across a lot of fields. And I'm sure you're already experiencing this, right? A lot of people are starting to lose their jobs from AI already. Even things like copywriting. Or even I recently saw a few videos about video editing via AI. Okay, so I'm sure you can imagine what I'm talking about. So what happens, right, when a lot of people's jobs start to get automated because of AI, or at least the barriers reduce? Okay, like I said, if everyone's basically augmented genius from this implant, then what makes you different and what makes you better at your job is going to reduce, and your unique value that you're providing to businesses is going to be reduced by what AI can actually replicate. And so what's going to happen soon, I believe, is that obviously because everyone's going to have a relatively similar skill base and a lot of things are going to be a lot more accessible, the middle class is going to start disappearing because jobs are going to go away, right? And a lot of jobs which just require knowledge or computation is just going to be taken by computers. So what happens then, I think, is that there's just going to be the upper class where people own assets, whether it be real estate or intellectual property of sorts, brand power, things like that. There's plenty of assets you could own, right, that are going to maintain that power. But then people in the middle are just not going to really exist. Like they just don't need to really be there. And there'll be a lot of people at the bottom. So I think there's actually going to be more of a two-class division. So as a sidebar, I've noticed that some people seem to think that prompt engineering is like the way of the future, where prompt engineering is just essentially being good at typing prompts at right now, like ChatGPT or whatever. So it gives you good results. And that is just not a vocation that's going to exist in the future, because it's I think a bit silly to think that AI is not going to be user friendly. It's obviously just the first stages of it, and the whole concept of it is going to be accessible for everybody. And once AI becomes more goal oriented, it's going to understand the needs of the individual more anyway. So they already are goal oriented, but to be further trained upon that data, it's just gonna, prompt engineering, not a thing, all right? Okay, so now we've spoken about the eradication of the middle class, right? And a lot of people seem to think that there is safety in creativity, okay? And I think that's probably a bit of wishful thinking, right? Because I think as it is, a lot of people are already not appreciative and cognizant of what creativity even is. And good graphic design, being a good drawer, etc., does not necessarily make you creative. It just makes you good at masking and creating this idea of creativity. And I think true creativity, I don't think I even really know what true creativity is, but I think it's extremely scarce. A good example of this, right, is how, and I'm sure everyone's heard about this, how when, DALL-E originally came out, there was the artist that used DALL-E to win an art competition. And obviously people got really triggered by that. But that's what I'm talking about. It's like, whether or not that art piece was creative is sort of irrelevant, because the art piece itself has had the masking of creativity. And so I guess for us as humans moving forward, if all these things are masking to be very creative, then it's going to be very hard for us to compete against that. So let me talk about why I think this is actually a lot scarier than what a lot of people think. Humans will have to do what AI or robots can't do, but just being original might be creative, but it doesn't necessarily mean it's valuable. So in the future, where there's AI and robots which are smarter than us being humans just trying to do what the robots can't do and having these creative tantrums is not valuable. It's not going to give us any safety. So alongside the eradication of the middle class, I think there's also going to be a tightening on creativity. All right, so the ideas that I've spoken about in this video so far might be, a bit weird or whatnot, and possibly poorly explained, not sure. And let me just clarify to say that I'm not saying that AI is going to take over the world. It might, but I don't think it will. And I think, in the best case scenario, what happens is that there's universal basic income, and there's, robots doing all our work, and we live a comfortable lifestyle without the same level of effort that we might need to, same level of effort and same level of education, etc., that we need to achieve nowadays. Okay, so now this is where the real sauce begins. Okay, let's picture this utopian world, right, where there's AI and there's robots doing all the hard work, and we have universal basic income. As I said before, the upper class is still going to have all the assets, and everyone else is still living a really comfortable life, even though, they're at the bottom. It's going to be a relatively comfortable life because of the abundance provided via technology. As a human living in that world, what actually happens? Because you got to think about the fact that maybe you're not so defined by your career anymore, right? You think about how many people, myself included, have their purpose and identity attached to their jobs and their passions and their goals, right? Their ambitions to reach particular career aspects or work in particular industries. So what happens when a lot of that is stripped away by the technology? And what happens, right, if I am correct and there is a eradication of the middle class, what happens when you don't have the agency to possibly change your external circumstance as much as you do now? So for example, now, let's just say you are a lower class citizen, but you want to change your circumstance. There are ways you can educate yourself, right, to try increase your income. But again, what happens in the future when everyone's got the same level of intellect, and you're not going to work harder than robots, you're not smarter than robots, how do you dig yourself out of the lower class? Well, you might not be able to, right? So your external circumstances, like the size of your house, might not be as much of a variable because you just can't control that as much. And so now we're talking about this future, right, where your identity is not formed by your career, your identity is not formed by what you know, or how smart you are or how good you are at doing particular things, because everyone's going to be able to do it at the same level, right? You're not going to be defined by even your bank account, because again, you might be stuck at the bottom with everyone else. So what's going to give us purpose then? What's going to give our lives meaning then? And so this idea is actually the main reason I wanted to start making these videos, because I truly believe that, look, it might be 5 years, it might be 20 years, but I seriously think one day the biggest problem is going to be humans trying to find their purpose, humans trying to self-actualize, to truly consider who they are in a very different landscape. And I think one of the ways that we're going to create purpose and meaning in our lives going forward as humans is through biology and human connection. And I really think those are one of the final frontiers of humanity. I think the ability for us to come together as humans and to see ourselves as humans is going to be one of the last ways that we're going to find purpose in our lives. That's only just a brief introduction to things I've been thinking about. I hope it made sense. Yeah, obviously I could talk about this for a long time, but hopefully through this channel, actually, I'm just going to talk about a lot of self-help stuff and whatnot. But honestly, the ultimate goal is to help people try find their sense of purpose, to try help them actualize in a changing landscape. Look, what do I know? Everything I spoke about might never happen. I think it will. It might take 5 years, it might take 10 years, it might take 100 years, But I think the reality is things are changing, and they will forever change. And I think people will always need a sense of purpose and finding ways to self-actualize. And that's what this channel is going to be about. So if that sounds like something you're interested in, please subscribe, and I will talk to you soon.